Okay, we are back again for our 3-day special. We're on catch-up mode right now. Today we're going to be speaking with Antoinette and Tower from BrickzwithTipz, all about property, their experience in property. They're going to be answering some of your questions. They've already got a really good platform where they answer loads of questions in regard to the property space. And today is an episode where I'd love for everybody to get involved and ask as many. So let me just add them in. While I do, if you're not already, make sure you're following the YouTube. If you want to watch this later and you've got to shoot after a little while, you can log back in by following us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or Spotify. Hello, the wonderful couple. How are we doing?
Jeez.
Hi.
Yo, bro, what you saying? You right, yeah?
I'm good. You say you got the double. You're doing real couple goals. The double AirPod, one each earrings. I see you. I see you guys shining. You know, utilizing technology for its
I was
best.
hoping you didn't see it.
Nah, I respect it. The efficiency levels are very high. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, good, man.
Thank
Can't
you.
complain, man. Can't complain.
Yeah, I'm good. I've been busy, but no complaints.
As always.
So for those that don't know you, and maybe for those that are catching up later, let's hear your socials and hear a bit about yourselves and what you do.
Yeah.
So we are known as BrickzwithTipz on social media. We have property platforms. We are on Instagram, Twitter, Telegram, LinkedIn. What else have I missed?
Facebook, YouTube.
And so just for those that are not watching, it's Bricks with a Z and with Tips with a Z as well, if you're trying to search it.
Yep. And what we do is we talk about property. We talk about property, most angles. So whether it's about trying to get on the property ladder, how to get on the property ladder. We talk about mortgages, remortgages, you name it. We talk about mostly anything really. And we're just trying to really help our community.
That's what I've been seeing. So I'm hoping today everybody's going to use the question box and get to ask some good questions. Like there's no such thing as like a silly question, but the more detail that you put in any of your question, hopefully the better answer, the better question you ask, the better answers that we can get from you. I saw actually, before we get into some of the questions, I've seen you're working with Channel 4 now, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So recently I've been doing some filming with Channel 4. So I've been doing it for some time, but obviously everybody finds out now. But for the last year and a half, I've been filming with Channel 4. So I'm the new presenter on a TV show, BAFTA winning TV show, by the way.
BAFTA winning TV show, I love that.
Called The Great House Giveaway. So I'll be on series 2 and 3 of that. And I've been filming with them, which has been really good. But obviously off the back of that, been doing, I'm on there as a presenter, but I've been doing some other bits on daytime TV shows, Channel 4, like Stess Pack Lunch or BBC, Rip Off Britain, Watchdog, The One Show, and so on and so forth. So it's been really good because I think that's everything that we're about. It's kind of just like, just in anything in life, right? You want to share your experiences with people. It's like, for example, I've got 2 brothers. I'm the middle, right? And my youngest brother, Antoinette's the eldest as well, for example. And what we found with our youngest siblings, which is the way that it should be, is that our youngest siblings have benefited from all of our mistakes and all the good things that we've learned, right? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Because we experienced it first. So obviously, Antoinette and I, we know that buying our first properties quite early on, I think I bought at 22 or so. I'm one of the first to do it, but it's one of those things that you don't do it in secret. Every single mistake I make, I try and let people know on BrickzwithTipz. Antoinette, we bought a property earlier this year, and Antoinette basically managed all of it because I was away filming. And it's a kind of thing where one of the first things she did after she completed is came online to share the experience and share a specific story about how things nearly went wrong, but they went right. And a lot of people loved that and did benefit from it. So that's just what that's what the story is basically, and that's what we hope to continue to be able to do.
And I think that's why you'll find, like, and I found like your page, like, it's got a lot of good information, not just for like, it's got loads of great information for those that are really on in their property journey, but also just like you have regular updates in regards to just maybe like legislative changes in regards to property or changes in regards to finance. When the budget comes out, I see you do an update on mortgage rates and how things are moving. And I think the idea of a platform that just shares information is really good, because there's so much, obviously we live in the information age, there's so much information out there,
Yeah,
but
there is.
trying to have it concise and condensed into somewhere that's digestible, I think is really key. And the fact that you guys are doing that and are giving away so much free information, like hats off to you for doing that, and also for
Thank you.
inspiring like those, like you said, slightly younger than you, because you'll see the direct impact from, like you said,
Absolutely.
younger brothers, sisters, close family members, etc. But then also the indirect impact of the person who you haven't even met. They might not even follow you, but they just see your page and a post that maybe came up on the Explorer page and they picked up and they took something away with it. So you're definitely having a wider impact on the community, which is why I really wanted to get you guys on today. We had a couple of questions come through, so let me have a look at them. Let's see if you've got an answer for this one. So the first question is from Mr. 6'4". So that's just bragging to start with, as I'm 5'8". And I feel like, you know what I mean? I don't know if we want to answer your question today because you're just showing off, but Mr. 6'4" has asked, could you recommend a good property accountant?
With property accounting, it depends exactly what you're looking for. So it depends. Are you looking for how to incorporate an SPV that's going to help you buy a property within that company, or are you looking for someone that's just going to help you do a self-assessment for your rental income if you've got several properties in your personal name? It's a tricky one, but what I will say is that I'll always plug my people first, and people that I trust. I'd say contact Savvy Accountant on Instagram. They're Savvy SAVVY Accountant, I believe. You type that in, you'll find them. Good accountants that I trust. Hopefully, they'll be able to help you. But generally speaking, if something is specific, they'll be able to forward you to specific accounts. They'll be able to help you with that. So generally speaking, with stuff like that, start with a trusted vendor, and then hopefully, if they can't help you out, they'll forward you on to someone else.
And I think a lot of the time when people ask a question like that, let me see if I can pin I don't know how to use technology. I don't know how to pin it, so I'm not even going to
I think
try.
it's pinned
However,
already. I can see it.
Yeah.
someone pinned it. Okay, good stuff. Someone's pinned. But yeah, a lot of the time when people ask a question in regards to like how to find a good builder, a good accountant, a good solicitor, obviously first point you need to understand what you want, which you identified, and the second thing is literally personal recommendations go a really, really long way. If somebody's had a great experience, it's very easy to look good online and have a great website. But if somebody's had a personal great experience, I think, so somebody obviously a credibility like yourselves, if you are recommending people, I also recommend the guys I use, 40 Accounting, 40 with an I, again, provided me with a really good service. But it's also different strokes for different folks. Not everybody's going to work for everybody. You've got to be able to work with them. But I hope that helps to answer your question, and enjoy being 6'4". Alexa, turn on kitchen lights. Thank you. It was a bit. All right, a little flex
Smart
on you,
home.
Mr. 6'4". Yeah, you ain't got a smart home, have you? Nah, my brightness was off. I wasn't feeling like I was shining like you two were, so I needed to come back. Let's have a look. So this is another question from Fitness Diaries, which is, any tips for first-time buyers that don't want to move too far away from London?
I'll let you take that one, but I'm always going to have my 2 pence on this one, so we'll answer this one first.
You don't want to move away from London.
Too far away.
Too far away from London. I think you've got you don't want to move too far away from London. Identify where exactly you want to move. Identify what the house prices are in that area, and find out what your affordability is. That's the first place that you need to start to even see whether you are in a position not to move too far away from.
And just to touch on the affordability quickly, because I've heard you talk about this in the past. In terms of a residential purchase, how does the affordability work?
So it depends on your salary. So depending on who you get a mortgage with, the mortgage lender will loan you between 4 to 4.5, 4.7 with some mortgage lenders. times your salary, and then obviously whatever deposit you've been able to save at the same time. I do think there are some websites where you are able to put in your salary and you'll get a rough idea of what you'll be able to be loaned. But yeah, that's what you've got to start with, what you're able to afford, and look into that specific area. You know, the house prices are going to vary sometimes from door to door. So anywhere that's close enough to London, you just need to know whether that's going to be within your price range. And yeah, also depends on what type of property you want to buy as well, whether it's a house, an apartment, a flat. You've just first of all got to see what your options are and whether you're able to move to not too far from London. That's always going to be your starting point, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree with everything you said. And I think tips wise, it's hard to give a tip on it because generally speaking, if we're talking about too far away from London, it's most nine times out of 10, it's all got to do with affordability all the time, right? Because if affordability wasn't an issue, we'd buy it in Mayfair, right? So it's all generally speaking got to do with affordability. So it's just looking at, like Antoinette said, how far your money can take you. Other options that you may have, like Antoinette said, maybe consider if you're comfortable with a flat rather than the house. Maybe consider you may have to compromise elsewhere, right? Maybe you stay close to London, but you don't have a driveway anymore, or you don't have a large garden anymore, or you're going for a 2-bed instead of the 4-bed that you originally wanted, right? Obviously, there are trade-offs. I always say to people that consume our content, always exhaust all options where a traditional buyer is concerned. Only after you've addressed all options and you can't get a traditional buy, even after compromising, you can't get a traditional buy, then you could potentially look to utilize some government schemes, but do all your research that you can. There's loads of information out there, a wealth of information, and work out if it works for you. Also, always, even before you even attempt the traditional buy, I always recommend people to look into right to buy first as well. See if you're eligible for right to buy before you even do traditional buy.
I think those are all of those are really, really good tips, and a lot of the stuff you said, both of you have said, would mirror my advice. Definitely kind of playing your wants versus needs, because wanting to live by London is a want, but it also may partly be a need. Wanting a house may be a want, but it's not necessarily a need. And it's that whole concept of potentially, from an investment perspective, as much as you have to also look at, is it an investment or is it a home? Because if you're going to get way more enjoyment out of the home element, you might have to move further out, and you just have to look at what your personal circumstances say. For everyone, I think it was Sanjay, a couple other people that asked questions in the chat. If you do use the question box, we'll answer them. We're not answering any questions today that are not being utilized by the question box. I learned that from Sam Norris in my last one, who refused to answer my questions. So I'm going to take that same energy and pay it forward.
Guys, can I just highlight something? I just want to highlight something that Kazi said as well, because I have to wheel this one up here. People need to understand that for some people, there's many people out there that living in London is a need, right? But you need to really analyze yourself, because for a lot of people, it's just a want, right? Some people need to live in London to look after family, so on and so forth, support bubble. Ask yourself today, do you need to live in London? Because a lot of people have been waiting for longer than I've even been a homeowner to buy in London.
And a lot
do you get what I'm trying to say?
Familiarity as well. You know, a lot of us.
Antoinette, can we get a little bit more volume just so we don't miss out on all the amazing stuff you're saying? You might have to shout at me, but it's fine.
Yeah. Let me see if I can.
Just a little.
So I was saying that a lot of it is down to familiarity as well. So a lot of people that grew up in London, like for example, a lot of my peers and a lot of people that grew up with me, we grew up in North London, and they want to stay in North London because that's what they're familiar with. You know, even after coming back home from uni, they wanted to stay in and around Enfield, Edmonton, Tottenham. If you try and buy a house in Tottenham now, especially with the new stadium, you're paying a premium just for the area, you know, and that's just because these people that I'm talking about specifically want to stay there because that's where they grew up, that's what they know. But is it actually worth paying a premium for those areas because that's what you've been familiar with over the past some 20 to 25 years, you know, you're just going to pay a premium for that. So maybe just, you know, think about going back to what you both said, is it a preference or is it a need?
And I think that's it, because you can sort of quantify it. Like, let's say you're living in London and everything has like a trade-off. So there's some really good transport links that are coming in with Crossrail and HS2 and different transport links that are coming in that mean actually, yes, you're 30 miles outside of London, but you're still 45 minutes from your job. And you were 45 minutes whether you lived in Tottenham or whether you moved to Luton. But you're looking at, okay, what's the travel going to cost me? What's the trade-off time like in terms of my actual time spent, and really putting in almost quantifying like your desires. So like, you know, like you would do if you were trying to like work out what are better out of two options. And some people say, okay, look, just do a sheet and you put the pros and cons of both and work them out, add weight in of where you find value for money, and really do that, because it's the same for everyone. Like, I would love a detached house where I live now. Do I want to go and spend 7 figures? No. So I bought somewhere a little bit further out, but you know, I still feel like it's a good investment. It still ticks the boxes, and then we work from there. So I think effectively, yeah, just wants and needs are really key. Let's have a look at this. Right. So Crops 109, with my mum being 60 years old, living in a council property. How long? I can't read and speak at the same time.
So long. We do. I think they meant, do we have the right to buy? How do we go about getting this? You can simply go on, just Google right to buy. There's a government website. They will ask you a short questionnaire. You can either answer it on behalf of your mum, or your mum can be with you and answer the questions. And then they will let you know if you're eligible or not. And then there are some rules to follow. I believe I may have some content on my page about right to buy as well. But simply you can go on the website and they kind of lead you towards it. And one thing that's important to highlight as well, if you're on the tenancy agreement as well, it can make you eligible to apply as well. But have a look at it. They're very clear on this. So hopefully, it says we are eligible. I think I just saw this. You are eligible. How do you go about doing it? There are rules on, just need to know where to start. What I would say is one of the best places to start is get a mortgage broker. Follow the rules on the Right to Buy website, but get a mortgage broker as well. They do the applications for them all the time, so they can kind of lead you. You can lean on their expertise to kind of hold your hand through the process to get a mortgage on it and then buy. And they can tell you all sorts of nice stuff, like sometimes you can use the equity, you can use the discount as a deposit sometimes, and actually get the house like that, which is quite cool. So they will let you know about that. So that's where I'd start. Yeah,
so that's good, because that means effectively, potentially, even if you haven't in a position to save, you still are able to purchase the property effectively without having to put your own money in. In terms of, I think you might have asked a question that was sort of how long do you have? As long as you're in that property, you know, your right isn't gonna expire. But obviously, with you being in the property, sometimes, for example, if the property was maybe a family home, and then you no longer, like, the children have grown up and you no longer have to be there, and there's relocation and stuff. So I'd always say, if you can, make sure you work out where you stand and try and execute it as quickly as possible, because literally, like, you know, I've told and I've heard stories of people that bought their right to buys at the right time, and that property kind of kickstarted their journey where they made more money from that right to buy than they made working for the last 10 years. So it's an amazing opportunity to execute. So I wouldn't wait. I wouldn't leave it as something I can do next week or the week after. It'd be something that I would be actively working towards. How can we execute this strategy? How quickly, and how can we use it to obviously benefit and uplift the family as a whole?
Genuinely, like, there's a lot of investments out there right now. A lot of things are popping. Listen, if you're eligible for right to buy, park all of that to one side for now, please, because that one is instant discount on property. It can really kickstart not only a property journey, but wealth within your family line, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, so this is the one from Sanjay, as he did great and relocated his question to the question box, so we're going to answer it now. So Sanjay has said, what is the best strategy to save for a deposit?
Let me answer that one.
Yeah, go for it.
I would say it all depends on what you start with, your disposable income, what you have that's disposable. and what out of that you're able to use to put aside every single month. But also have a goal as well. I think some people find it harder to just save for saving's sake.
Oh.
So start with and have a number in mind that you want to reach. Have a time frame in mind that you want to hit that number for. And I'll say start with that, to be fair. I think in terms of strategy, I think I'm just going to repeat myself, but having a goal number of what you want to hit, and that will also start with what type of property you want to buy, where you want to buy, what type of house prices are out there for the area that you want to buy in. That will be your ballpoint of how much you will need to save, whether you're putting a 5% deposit down, a 10% or 15 or whatever it is. So yeah, have a ballpoint number and start with that.
I think my strategy was, when I bought my first property, was I got paid and then I saved and spent after. And when you save and spend after, you can spend without guilt because you've done your saving for the month, right? So I'd save the money and then I'd blow everything after, basically. Obviously, that was the time where I was living at my mum's house. So people that may be renting or something like that, it might be a bit different, but it's a good mentality to have. I'm just going to go on and highlight what Antoinette said as well. It's an excellent point. Go and find out what your goal is. Go and find out how much your salary can get you, how much they will lend you based on your salary. From there, you can get an idea of how much deposit you will need to buy the property that you can afford. Once you've got that figure, be it 20,000, be it 40,000, be it 60,000, you're now saving towards a tangible goal. I've heard so many people that consume our content say that they were saving, they got up to 12K or they got up to 21K and they just bought a car or they just bought a watch. And I don't blame them, but I blame the fact that they didn't have something.
There was no goal.
There was no goal because some people had the money for a deposit and they didn't even know. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So you need to have a goal. You can't just save for a property. Even if you're only saving £200 and you need £20,000, find out that you need £20,000 because at least then you can now calculate what needs to happen. Are these things tangible? Are these things realistic? So the goal is probably the most important thing. And this is free information you can find out today.
Yeah, no, I think that's because, and just to parody that, to use an example, have you ever tried running with no goal? You'll stop way before and run nowhere near as hard, if you don't know when it stops. Because if you know you're trying to run 5K and you've got your AirPods in your ear, you're running and it's giving you your split times. Last 5K was X, last kilometer was X amount. You're like, okay, I've got a bit more in the tank. If you're just thinking you're running forever, you're going to give up because as soon as your body gets tired, you're like, it's enough now, I'm tired. Whereas when you've got that goal, you're working towards something, you can compartmentalize it into, I've done another 100 meters, I've done another kilometer, I'm halfway there, I'm 3/4 of the way there. And that achieving those little micro milestones is what will really help you push on. So I think, that's a really good answer in terms of the goals.
That's a serious one, That's a serious one.
I am going to be an inspirational speaker one day.
I'm telling you, you will get people telling you, Ty was using your bars on a
Don't worry, man. Listen.
Video again,
Do you know what the maddest thing is? Anything I say is I put it out there to be out there. One of the biggest things I've said is every time I've made another pound, what I've realized is there's unlimited money out there to make.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Every time you realize you do something, you say, look, do you know what? There's so much money out there to make that. You saying something or repeating something that I've said, me bigging you up, vice versa. All it's going to do is help all of us elevate.
It doesn't take away.
If I hear that, big me up and I'll be like, I'm so happy that it's out there.
I'm going to rinse that one.
Don't worry, man. You rinse that one. Rinse it. Just give me just one of these on channel 4 so I know it's for me. But and the other thing I would just say, just to kind of add my 2 cents onto what you said about saving for a deposit. I think the thing you said to start with, save as if it was spending. Okay, I'm going to put money into my savings account. Then look at how to make your saving as efficient as possible. So whether that be, maximizing your ISA, making sure that you use that every year, maximize what you can put into it if you can do that. Beyond that, one thing that I know helped a lot of people save is actually utilizing like these new technology tools, like with their online banking, that tell you, do you know you spent £500 on fast food this month?
Yeah.
Like seeing that visually, like seeing that percentage of the pie chart will be that reminder that, did you really need to do that?
Yeah,
Wasn't, you know, a little home cooking worthwhile? So
Honestly,
I think using these apps and using technology, and then the last thing is also investing. So obviously putting money in the ISA is investing, but at the same time as you're saving, if you can use that capital as efficiently as possible, you're going to reach your saving goal faster. Obviously there's an element of risk with any investment. So just to kind of like quantify that, there is an element of risk, but definitely I think investing, saving, and just being responsible for your goal is definitely going to help you save as quickly as possible for a deposit or anything that you want to save for.
Absolutely.
But I think that was a really good question, Sanjay, so much appreciated. Let's see what's next. What's this? So what are the pros and cons of changing a residential mortgage to a buy-to-let? Actually, you look like you like this question. You had a very, I feel like you're going first because that smile was big, like, yeah, I got this. She's like having a drink, she's getting ready to spit some bars.
It's kind of a weird question because you'd have a motivation for changing it from a residential and a buy-to-let, from a residential to a buy-to-let. And I guess the transition that you make, they're less of pros and cons, they're more facts basically. So a buy-to-let, you need, if you're making the transfer over, you need a certain amount of equity. Generally 25%, but sometimes it can be as low as 20%. Residential mortgage products tend to have lower interest rates, basically. So you would be paying less interest on a residential product rather than a buy-to-let product. However, because of the nature of buy-to-let products, they generally are a lot more comfortable lending on an interest-only basis. Yeah. So your monthly payments now on a buy-to-let product, if you do opt for an interest-only payment, you will be paying a lot lower on a buy-to-let interest-only product. The question specifically about the mortgages, so what else is there? Generally speaking, a buy-to-let mortgage product will have a higher mortgage arrangement fee. When you're taking out the mortgage, so if you're going to do that via a remortgage, generally speaking, when you're doing a residential remortgage, they throw in a lot of freebies, free legals, £500 cash back. A lot of those are a lot less frequent for a buy-to-let product because they're doing business and they want to eat out of your business. So they're going to come and chop some there as well. But yeah, generally speaking, those are not pros and, well, they are pros and cons, but I like to state differences because you kind of know what you're going for when you
it's what's fit for purpose, I guess.
Exactly
because
that, yeah.
Because obviously from a residential perspective, you could apply for, if you were just saying, look, I no longer need this property, maybe I've relocated, moved in with a partner, you could go for consent to let. I guess the pro of switching potentially would maybe you can withdraw some, you know, further equity because you're now renting the property out and you want to switch it to a buy-to-let. Maybe your income requirements don't allow you to get access to that equity, but maybe having it on a buy-to-let would. Like you said, the cons, interest, you know, if you're looking at, I guess it's more so maybe consent to let versus a full buy-to-let.
Okay, yeah. So I guess.
So then like you said, like you touched on, if you left it as consent to let, it's probably going to be on repayment. So although you're paying money back and your interest is cheaper, your net profits are going to be lower on a monthly basis because you're paying more. So I guess it really depends if you're looking at that property as something you want to withdraw money from or something that you want to cash flow more efficiently. But again, it's just all very like the main thing is circumstance. What are you trying to get out of the process?
Yeah.
But I think that was a good one. Where should we go? Let's have a look. I'm going to just click on a question without reading it and hope that it's a good one. Any tips / online source to learn about adding value to properties through remodeling? It comes easy to you guys, but how does a beginner get that mindset?
I'm gonna plug our Insta. I did a post on that. It's on our page. I can't remember how long ago it was, but I put down.
If you've got them, by the way, if you've got these posts, send them to me later on. Just DM me, and I'll repost them as well to share them for anyone who's come in and can't see, don't want to leave the live right now, but want to go back to it. I'll share them and kind of I'll get the question up as well that people ask. They can make sure they get that value out of those posts.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we just commented on a few things that you can do to add value to your property. I'll just name a few now. So extensions, loft conversions, kitchen remodel, bathroom remodel. Even if you've got like a large living room, for example, you can split the space into two. Even simpler things like repainting the whole house or laying down new flooring or anything like that. I think a lot of value comes from essentially keeping the house in good shape.
So if you was trying that first impression, when you walk in, does this look like, you know, somewhere I want to live? Or if you're going for a refinance, does it look like somewhere that's worth the money you're asking for?
Exactly.
Yeah, this is it.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and as well, if you've got the space, so I mean, quite a few people that we know who are looking and in the process of buying, if they're finding that they're unable to buy a 4-bedroom or a 3-bed, they're actually viewing the property to see if there's the possibility of an extension or a loft conversion. You know, is your garden big enough to extend your kitchen out or put an extra room in the back or have an outhouse? Or, you know, they're asking to go up into the loft to see whether they'll be able to do a loft conversion, or even simply asking, you know, do you know whether we're able to do a loft conversion, because they know that they can't right now afford their 3-4 bedroom that they want, but in the future they know they'll be able to get that by doing it up, and then essentially, even though it's going to cost, the return that you're going to get in the end of it by turning a 2 into a 3-bed is going to add value to the property. So yeah, but go on, have a look on our post. I think I put like 5 or 10 things to do to add value to.
Well, I'll make sure I share that one after.
Yeah, we'll send it over after. I was gonna say as well. The last thing is, I always tell people that, do you know what, we're all consumers anyway. So a lot of the time, I always say, start with yourself. What do you like when you go to view a property? What strikes out to you? What tends to be the most important thing when you go into properties? What are you most comfortable compromising on? And what is the ones that are, now this thing has to be very nice. And just like Antoinette said, generally speaking, we're looking kitchens, bathrooms, follow trends as well. Open plan living is a massive trend right now. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And yeah, just a lot of these things that you like yourself. You're a consumer just like everybody else. You're looking to buy in the market. So the things that you like are a lot of the time likely to be, unless it's like some crazy design, but yeah, a lot of the things you like are likely to be something that other consumers will like. So yeah, it's a good starting point.
Yeah, definitely. And these things, I mean, the ones that I've actually seen a few on like Rightmove over the past few months, and I just randomly watch the market sometimes, and there'll be some properties on there that have had a refurb or a remodel, and they literally are put on the market and gone within 48 hours.
It's him.
No, I'm chilling, bro. Listen, you see the price that you were talking about just there? The nice properties, I'm not a nice property buyer. Boo!
I'm saying the ones that be remodeled and put back on 48 hours.
Oh, yeah, that's a bit of me. I'm the one buying the ones with the green bathrooms and the pink bathrooms.
This is it, pink
with
bathroom.
Carpet in the bathroom.
Carpet in the bathroom. When you find a carpet in the bathroom, you know you found one with potential.
Right, listen, I've seen some. Listen, I bought a property like with no roof. I bought a property that had a living fox. You know, so we worked through the worst stuff. But I definitely think that thing about first impressions, because we say it in personal life and it's the same for property. First impressions count. Like, what does that property say to you when you first walk through the door? So if you look at a lot of my developments, something where I overspend sometimes is that curb appeal, the driveway, the brick clean, the windows at the front. Because trying to change a preconception is a lot harder than continuing an attitude towards, this look nice, rather than changing somebody's opinion. Human nature don't like change. Once you're like, I'm not sure, going in and looking at the kitchen, it being lovely. So making sure that first impression to any buyer is really good. And then the other thing is just pound for pound value. So it'd be great to stick in an extension, but is that £40,000 going to get me £40,000 more worth of value? Because we're talking about adding value as opposed to just, just remodeling for the sake of it. But yeah, that's all really, really good advice. I'm trying to think what question to go to next. I think, again, this question, by the way, is from Tinashe Z. When people talk about tax, I always like to start off with the fact that we should use the word avoid and continue to say what is the most efficient way to manage your tax, because tax avoidance, tax aversion are two different things. One is legal and one isn't. But the question is, hi guys, my parents are almost finishing paying their mortgage and they want to retire abroad, leaving the house to us. How can we avoid inheritance tax?
With something like that, especially because in order to get the right advice, they need to know a lot more about your personal circumstances. I'd see either a wealth planner or a tax advisor for that. Generally speaking, for most things tax, that is the answer as well. Simply because it's very, very specific and you've got professionals that study and work against how the rules change, so on and so forth. I know how my tax works for me, but for the next person, it may be completely different. I don't know if Kazi's got a tip to...
In terms of efficiencies, so like with inheritance tax, there's a rule of time. So technically, you could buy the property at a reduced rate now, and because it's their residential, or effectively, they can transfer the asset to you now, and obviously all things remaining well, your parents' health remains well. You know that if you've owned it for a certain amount of time, inheritance tax has I think it's, where are my accountants in the building? I know we're going to have one. I want to say 7 years off the top of my head. 7-year rule, I was right. See, Lee Chow. So you've got the 7-year rule, which means if you owned it for 7 years, you wouldn't be liable for that inheritance tax. If you were liable for the inheritance tax, as siblings, you can also, I think there's a threshold of, I think it's like 250 or 300K that it's tax exempt effectively. So you would also, it depends how much the property itself is worth. But I think the main thing that you did say is that, it depends, like, again, on personal circumstance.
Yeah,
my guy.
And it's a minefield. It's honestly, like, in the UK, it's stressful. It's a minefield because even, as you mentioned, it's bang on. But even then, like, when you do buy the property of your parents, you probably will end up paying stamp duty at the full values rate today.
Yeah, which is where you have to, and which is where the tax advisor on specific circumstance comes in, because technically, if you're buying it as your residential home, then it's not the end of the world if you buy it for below market value, because you pay lower stamp duty on the property. But then if you're going to flip the property and you bought it for really low and it's going to be an investment, you're then going to pay your own much higher tax liability in the long term. So really, there's also those associated costs, like yourself and Adewale just mentioned in the comments as well in regards to stamp duties. There are going to be some transactional costs, but definitely getting a tax advisor or, like I said, an investment, like somebody to manage your investments to look into it as a specialist is definitely really good advice. Going to skip on because we've got a lot of questions to answer. If you have just joined us, any questions that you do have, please use the question box, as we won't be answering questions in the general chat. This question again, it might be too specific, but how do you find good builder's insurance and what do you need to look for?
How do you find good buildings or builders?
I think it's
probably buildings.
So effectively, I guess what they're asking for is like the public liability insurance, and but realistically, you could just go to a good broker. Like you go to a good broker, explain to them your circumstance, and they'll be able to tell you what product is maybe the cheapest or what's the best for value, and you then just do your own relevant due diligence on the specific insurance company to make sure that you feel like it's a good fit and they've got a good reputation. I think who's a broker? Kelly Upstaged, I think, could help with that. she does that type of insurance. So she does a lot of life insurance and critical life care cover, but she also does building insurance as well, and public liability insurance. So if you get in touch with Kelly, I did a live with her in season 2. You'll find her episode, and yeah, speak to her about it, and she'll be able to help you with that in more detail. Let's see what else you've got. Questions. Oh, I like this one. I know you've got an opinion on this. What are your opinions on the first-time buyers going through the shared ownership route, houses over full ownership for a home in London as a need? Which I guess is a good caveat, the fact that they said as a need as well.
Shared ownership as a need for a home in London.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah. So I think we both have the same opinion on this. I think we always say try and do it in the traditional way as much as you can. Obviously, government schemes are there to help people get on the property ladder. So if that ends up being your only option, then I'll just say just make sure that whatever scheme you go for, whether it be shared ownership or help to buy, just make sure that it suits your circumstance. And as the question specifically says, as a need, then yeah, why not?
I think that it's a really good question, because this is a lot of what our content is about. Naturally, a lot of our people that consume our content are Londoners. London is a very expensive place to buy. Mm-hmm. So you find a lot of people that large majority of our audience are priced out of London. So we often get questions about buying using government schemes. Like Antoinette said, I always say exhaust all options where traditional buyers are concerned first. Look at compromising if possible. But the person has mentioned buying in London as a need. I always say if you need to use a government scheme, consider help to buy first before consider shared ownership, and then consider shared ownership. Shared ownership works for some people. I did a very extensive video on shared ownership, and I shared my opinion on it at the end. I think that with any of these government schemes as well, and I think this goes for so many things in the world, learn all you can about it and then move savvy with it as well. I'll tell you what I kind of mean, right? So shared ownership is a scheme whereby you can buy a share of a property, right? And the idea is that you staircase up to 100%. And I mentioned the idea is that you staircase up to 100% as well. And I say idea for a reason. And because in the video that I did with shared ownership, as you staircase up, sometimes your potential buyers that you can buy or share reduce. So if you own 75% of a shared ownership property, instead of having a pool of buyers that want to buy 25%, which is the larger pool, you now have only got the option of buyers that want to buy 75%. And the thing is, 75% is so close to 100% that if you've got 75% of a 400k flat, which is 300k, a lot of the people that can afford that will just go buy traditionally, basically. Yeah. And another thing I'll say that I've learned personally, that I do actually hear success stories of shared ownership and people coming out with equity. But all the success stories I have, people pulled up their money, they didn't staircase, they held it to one side, and they just kept their 25%. They then sold that 25%, even though there were fees that came out of it and so on and so forth, and added it to their savings and then moved on. So I'd say just learn. This is what we always say. Learn as much as you can, and platforms like ours and everybody else in the property space is there, so you've got all of the information. Sometimes the information isn't broken down as good as it can be on the websites and such, and that's why we break them down completely, and you can make your decision from there, basically. But I'd say just learn, and find out what's best for you. Everybody's scenario is different.
Yeah, I think.
Go on, no.
Yeah, just to echo what Tyler was saying as well, it's going into detail about what specifically works for you is very important.
Yeah.
You know, even though the question says it's a need to move into London, maybe once you read through what shared ownership or right to buy can give you, you may even end up changing your mind or decide that, yeah, this is 100% for me, because it is all down to your individual preference and what you can do and what you want to do with the share at the end of it. Like you said, you can either end up staircasing up, or you can pull out what you can get out at whatever time you want to as well. And I mean, we always say traditional because we just think it's more of a...
There's a lot more independence.
Yeah,
independence is important in property.
It's extremely important, especially because property is not a short-term gain at all. So your circumstances today aren't going to be the same in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. And you don't want to feel like you have not made the wrong decision, but you don't want to feel like, oh, you could have potentially had more freedom if you went down a different route. So I just think it's very important to exercise all your options, no matter what it is, and then make a firm and final decision as to what you want to go ahead with.
Yeah, I think that's all really good advice, because I'm not that versed in shared ownership. It's not something I've executed. The success stories I have heard about a lot of the time came from people targeting specific areas they couldn't afford with a conventional mortgage, because they had a very good feeling that there will be significant capital appreciation in said area. So got into an area they couldn't afford at a good price, property appreciated, they continued to grow and progress within personal circumstances, and whether or not they leveraged and they staircased up to 100% or exited at their initial start point, it was the fact that they invested smartly to start with. So I think that always plays a big role in terms of shared ownership schemes. But again, we need a house, and shared ownership versus renting, there's great conversations on that. There's great ownership versus shared versus conventional. And I think the great thing about a lot of the questions everybody's asked today is that you've already answered them in a lot of detail, particularly on the Instagram, BrickzwithTipz, both with a Z on the bricks and the tips. So if you are watching this at a later date, or you're watching this now, when you get out of here, make sure you go and follow, go and check out their page, because there's a lot of answers to these questions in further detail. But I'm going to skip on to another question. We've probably got about 5 minutes left before we wrap up. So I'm going to try and pick some questions that maybe are going to help as many people as possible. And I think this is a really good one here from Sasha, who said, when going to property investor / networking events, how can you sell yourself when still new to the business, preferably as a deal sourcer, as there's so many out there, and a lot of investors can do it for themselves?
I'd say something that's quite transferable is just your people skills, how relatable you are, how good you are at talking to people. It's just like, I wouldn't say being a property sourcer in a space like that is sales, but a lot of the qualities that a salesperson would have, you'd have to execute there basically. And it's just your ability to be relatable, your ability to speak to someone about something they know about, and have them engage in what you have to say as well. And a lot of these things are, something like that is transferable. The scenario that the person described is very similar to how do you convince an estate agent to give you a rent-to-rent property, or how do you go on a house viewing and as a landlord, and how do you convince them to do rent-to-rent when so many people have hit them up on Gumtree already, blah, 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 blah. And it's all about getting a person to buy into you first, I'd say. And then off the back of that, basically, once you've got the person to buy into you, you can then start having your conversation. Because like you said, there's so many other property sources that will be there doing the same thing. You just need to stand out and get some buying into yourself.
Can I help with this one? Because I think it's something that as a developer that's looking for deals actively, I deal with a lot of deal sources, and I get approached by a lot of younger or novice, I should say, like people of any age, deal sources. And I think about, like, if you were sending your CV out and you weren't getting a good response to your CV, effectively that's what you're doing when you're pitching yourself as a deal sourcer. So if you're not getting the response that you want, ask for feedback and ask them why you don't think maybe it's the presentation. Maybe the deal is bad. Maybe, like you said, it's the people skills. But get that feedback of what you could do to better yourself to allow you to present a good deal. If you're new to it, chances are maybe you haven't got a deal across the line yet. So convincing somebody to work with you could potentially be quite difficult. But if you've got a great deal and you approach myself or you approach Antoinette and say, look, I've got this great deal, when you can see the deal and on paper it's a great deal, we're going to do business with you. So also homing your craft in terms of being a deal sourcer. If you want people to do business with you, you have to be good at what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think, well, yeah, definitely. It's you can do it. Like, look, the product is key in that answer. If you present me a good deal, it doesn't matter if it's your first time or your 100th time. I'm going to go with the person who's got the good deal over the person who's got a load of experience.
It's the numbers that make sense.
The numbers are king in that regard. Okay, I think we've got time for one or two more questions. This one is very accountancy led, so you maybe don't have to answer it fully specifically, but just some tips around it. So when buying in a limited company, are there a maximum number of directors or a maximum number of shareholders, and do all the shareholders need to be directors?
This is a funny one because you don't know the answer unless you've asked. But I think it's 4. I think the number is 4 that most lenders go for. 4 directors, 4 shareholders. Can't remember the answer on if they have to be different people, but I believe it is 4 that lenders are comfortable with. So 4 directors, 4 shareholders, I believe. I specifically inquired about this one about a year ago now.
Yeah, I've had some friends that have asked and they've said, you know, we're going to be in this group and we want to be shareholders. You'll find you can have a load of shareholders. Like you can have a load of people that have shares in the business, that have a stake in the business. It's a bit more complicated, but in terms, all your shareholders don't have to be directors, so that hopefully answers that question. In terms of directors, what you need to bear in mind is any shareholder / director that has any director that has a 25% stake in the business, they have to be they're going to be effectively credit checked as part of the application. So if you're trying, it's going to be more complicated for you when going for lending. And that's the main thing you need to consider. The lending is if you're cash, say for example, you're a collective that have put money in and you're working together, like a scheme of you might have had 10 of you that have grouped up and all put money in and you're doing it cash, not the end of the world. You can kind of structure your company how you want because you don't have accountability to a third party. But the second you need to get that lending, you're going to find yourself jumping through a lot of hoops if you've got a lot of shareholders and a lot of directors. So sometimes, again, speak to an accountant, speak to a tax advisor and a financial advisor. There's normally more efficient schemes, so like ways you can manage the money so people still have a protection over their assets and their investments, but they don't necessarily have to be a director of the company, which is more straightforward.
Yeah, no, alternative to that is basically drawing up some kind of an agreement. I think with any kind of group investments like that, you'd probably want to draw up an agreement anyway. Draw up a legal document to say that what you don't want to have is 2 years down the line, 2 of your shareholders want to sell and the other 2 don't want to. So you probably want to have like
I think it's milestones. Called like, if you're in a company, you have like an article of association
exactly that,
which determines how the directors are going to interact. And sometimes you have things like vested and non-vested shares, which means for you to earn your shares in the business, if like say for example, me and Tyra were going to go into business tomorrow, but we were doing sourcing. Imagine we set up a company and I don't do any sourcing, you bring all the business, and I'm like, well, I own 50%. But if you have like vested shares, it means that to earn your shares, you have to have pre-established requirements that both parties have to achieve basically it sets parameters and sets requirements and sets a level of understanding between both partners, between that and the article of association, which hopefully would protect all parties to a degree. Final question, because a couple people, I didn't realize people can see the questions, but this question a couple people have asked for an answer to, and it is quite vague and obviously it depends on circumstance, but Rayan said, say you had £100,000 and wanted to get into property, but knew nothing about it. What would you do? And we're going to get quite a quick answer, I think, from all 3 of us, just to make sure that we can save this live so everyone can get future benefit from it. So we'll keep it under an hour.
Should you want to go first or can I go first?
Go first.
If you've got no experience in property and you've got 100k and you want to get experience in property, buy a home. You will learn so much off your home.
Yeah.
There's other benefits as well. You put down a lower deposit and you get to learn about property maintenance while being in the house instead of buying one up in Liverpool where you've got no experience of traveling to property and people could potentially be taking advantage of you.
And I want to add to that as well, because we've got a Telegram group and a lot of people have actually learned so much from.
How do we get into the group? Plug what we're selling. How do we get into the group?
Just search BrickzwithTipz on Telegram again. Bricks with a Z, Tips with a Z. It's a public group for now. So just search it up, join, and yeah, loads of people just ask questions and get answers very frequently.
From their own individual experience. You know, they've had cash, they've bought a property, they've had no idea where to start. They just knew that they wanted to invest, and they're answering so many questions in the Telegram group based off their own experience. So yeah, start. I would agree with you. Start there actually, and then obviously research. Speak to people who have done it before. You can speak to us. You can watch our YouTube videos. You can speak to Kazi. Just there's so much information out there as well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I would mirror pretty much. And it sounds like we had a team meeting beforehand and said we're all going to do the same stuff. But I would mirror what they said, particularly in terms of if you know nothing, you're at a good starting point because you know nothing. So go and know something. Like, don't spend forever knowing something, but it's a lot of money. If you spent your hard work time, or your parents have, or you've inherited, or whatever the way you've got £100,000, you've got to protect that. So protect that by investing in your knowledge to understand what you want to get out of property. Do you want income? Do you want capital appreciation? Do you want safety? Do you want a home? And then at that point, it's probably easier to ask a question. Then you probably come back and say, right, I've got £100,000. I know that I want to get into a buy-to-let where I add value, and the question would evolve. So I think getting to the point where you can ask a more detailed question is somewhere where that you'd really get more value from what you get out of that money as well. Absolutely. I appreciate you guys coming on today.
Appreciate you having us.
We couldn't answer all of your questions. I'm actually going to start doing some in-person interviews. So I'm going to be hitting you up to come down. We're going to probably film them in one of the projects somewhere that looks fancy, and I'll get you guys to come down and get involved. And that's who I met. Is it Andy or And Bride? That's who I met in Dubai randomly. It was like, oh, you helped me buy a house. I was like, that's it. So big up you. I was trying to find you the other day. I spoke about you the other day. So shout out you. Tomorrow we got an anxious investor. Similar types of content, so loads of little bite-sized digestible bits that he talks about in terms of getting into property, how he did it, what the pitfalls are. So definitely we're literally on catch-up week, 3 episodes this week, and then next Sunday we have Dungar Properties, or all about BRRR in Wales. So again, loads of great episodes this week, loads of great value. If you haven't already, and I've just caught this at the end, it will be available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify. So whatever your preferred DSP is, you can download and listen to it then and catch up. I've been Property by Kazi. You've been
BrickzwithTipz.
Look how we work together. The synergy's been great. I appreciate you all, and we're going to catch up very soon. Take care.
Take care.